Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested, and welcome back to Projections, where, well, this week we're just a couple days away from the launch of the Oculus Quest 2. And as I said in my review, this is quite an interesting piece of hardware because it's the successor and replaces the Oculus Quest, but the content ecosystem at launch is essentially exactly the same. If you had a Quest, if you bought games and titles and experiences in the store there, it just works out of the box. There's no porting anything over. There's full backward compatibility. And so one of the things that we're going to be interested in looking at is what new games are coming out that are maybe optimized for the Quest 2 or better take advantage of the hardware here. And I know for many of you, it might be the first VR headset you're picking up and you're looking at the wide range of games. And I know Oculus has put a lot of attention to making sure there's going to be genres of games that suit people's interests. And of course, one of the most popular genres of multiplayer games right now is Battle Royales. And there is going to be a Battle Royale game launching on the Quest as well as on PC VR, and that's Population 1. This is actually a game that was announced back in 2018, and we hadn't heard much about it. It had popped up in a couple places, a couple conventions, but it's coming out later this month on October 22nd. With a price of $30, and it will be fully cross-compatible between desktop VR play and mobile VR play. It will run on the Quest 1, and it runs pretty well on the Quest 2. I've had a chance to play a couple rounds of this game. To describe what it is, it's very, if you've played Fortnite, if you've played PUBG, well, it captures all the essence of those Royale games into a VR experience. It's 18 players in squads only, so squads of up to 3, so 6 teams, 6 squads of 3 players each, dropped into a 1 square kilometer map. There's just one map this game is launching with, and they've made it a pretty impressive map. It's one of these things where we have tried a bunch of Royale games in VR, whether it's for Pavlov as a mod, or a Rec Room has a Rec Royale, and one of the things that I always find myself struggling with is the scope of the map. I've always wanted something that had the expansiveness of the Fortnite map or the PUBG map. And while this doesn't have vehicles and it's not, you're not spending minutes at a time running from one end to the other, it is a really big map, and it's filled with tons of kind of zones and areas that you fight out in, lots of buildings, as well as a giant central tower in the center of the map. Pretty impressive. For VR though, getting around the world is an interesting thing. There's teleport, and I know in Rec Royale there's a big debate between teleportation for combat versus kind of the free locomotion. Here it's free locomotion. You're walking around. There's no jump button, but you are grappling, you are climbing, and you're also gliding. One of the things they designed specifically for this game is the ability for you to climb on top of buildings, walk off, spread your arms, and glide around. And they really encourage you to really do the scaling and climbing and gliding to have a little bit of verticality in terms of the combat. It's not just fighting on equal planes or behind buildings. It's about even constructing these platforms where you're climbing up, climbing the tallest building you can, sniping, and then gliding down to really get across the map quickly and have a competitive advantage when you're on these firefights. So one of the interesting things about Population 1 is that cross-platform compatibility. And the developers, BigBox VR, had to design this game, had to engineer it so it would run well on the lowest end spec, which would be the Quest 1, a mobile headset, as well as on a high-end spec, and basically be balanced for both, where you're not going to feel like there's a competitive advantage just because someone's playing on the PC side. The draw distances have to be the same. There can be differences in terms of level of detail, textures, and the like, but it needs to basically not be unfair for people playing on mobile VR or people playing on tethered headsets. And so I had a chat with the co-founders of BigBox VR, Chia-Chin Lee and Gabe Brown, about the making and design of Population 1 and how they created a Royale game that would work well in VR across multiple types of headsets. Let's take a listen.
So Gabe and I started this company to really build products that are only possible in VR. So we got into VR, thinking that VR is going to be a giant transformative tech, and it's going to be a giant computing wave that will change people's lives. And so what we did was we looked at VR and we said multiplayer is going to be gigantic in VR. And when we look at multiplayer, what we did was we actually studied experiences on Twitch, just regular pancake games, to see what kind of games really worked well. And we watched a lot of DayZ and H1Z1 and stuff like that. And they're just really fun to stream and fun to watch. So we just imagined ourselves being in VR in those intense FPS combat experiences. And yeah, so we just really geeked out on that.
Yeah, I just remember our first conversations. Chachin was thinking like Arma 2, like crawling through the grass and just like sitting there, like on the ground, just watching people fight. And so that was what our first inspiration. We were first started prototyping Population One, like I think almost 3 years ago. It's like we started playing around with that concept. But yeah, just like Chachin said, like the foundation of our company is all about VR multiplayer. The first thing that we did was when we first started playing with the before the index, or not the index, the Vive even came out, the first thing we did was like, let's both be together in VR. And that's kind of like the foundation of everything that we've done, is all about bringing people together in VR that way.
And the genre itself, right? Like the battle royale genre, it's very popular. Obviously, you mentioned some of the games that were early in it, and it's kind of changed also over the past couple of years. It's one of the benefits, of course, is it's very familiar. People who, if you say this is going to be like a royale game for VR, they kind of get it. They know what to expect, but there are also fundamental differences when you're designing something that someone's going to be wearing a headset and using track controllers, and even moving around the world is very different than if you're watching a flat screen and playing a gamepad. So you talk about, what elements of that genre you really wanted to incorporate and what had to be really tweaked and tuned to make make most out of VR.
Yeah, so the key thing that we really wanted was, if you think about being inside of VR, you're like, well, what do I really want to do? And if you put players in a world where they can see this giant world in VR, the first thing people want to do is they want to just go anywhere if they see it. If they see a wall, they want to go climb it. If they see a giant building, you were in the demo, correct? So did you see that giant tower? Were you able to climb it? I'm just curious. So like anything you see in the world, you're like, I'm gonna go climb it. And after you climb it, you're like, well, what should I do? I should fly off it. And when you combine that with combat, it just gets really interesting. And so Gabe and I created this thing called vertical combat system. And Gabe, do you want to go a little bit into that as well?
Yeah. So the vertical combat system is trying to bring to life the mental picture that people have when they think of VR if they've never tried it before. It's like, oh yeah, I want to be Neo in the Matrix and bullets are whizzing by me, or Ready Player One, where you're just effortlessly moving throughout the environment. And that's something that when we first started VR, is like, it's a very difficult challenge to move through the environment the way that you would expect to. And so a lot of VR games definitely tend to put you on rails just because it's an easier problem to solve. But for us, just like Chachin was saying, is like, we wanted to be able to move through the world and create interesting moments by unlocking players' ability to move anywhere in the map. So have this 1 kilometer square map, you can climb anything and fly off. And so it was really designed to do that. And I don't know if you want to get into technical details, but we also did a ton of research about how to make this super comfortable, because flying and climbing and jumping off stuff in VR could be something that makes people sick. And when Chachin and I were first trying the game, like, we got sick all the time just because it wasn't quite ready yet. But we've done quite a bit of methods, like using the same simulator sickness questionnaires that the Royal Air Force uses to help us calibrate and have a scientific method around, is this working or not? And I think we brought like hundreds of people into the studio to have them play the game to verify that what we're doing with the vertical combat system delivers, in terms of delivering that experience of being that stunt performer without all the special effects and all the safety gear, but also a very comfortable experience. So there's a ton of other tricks that are going underneath the hood. So the most obvious one is the vignette that blocks your view. So it helps reduce the visual flow in your periphery, which is how your brain perceives motion. And so we can trick your brain into thinking you're not moving even though you are. And then there's other tricks too, such as when you're flying, you can bank, like I'm going to bank left, or I'm going to bank right. Normally, like you guys know, at an airplane, you'd actually be turning, but in our game, you're just strafing. It kind of completes the illusion of like what you'd expect to happen, but in a way that's super comfortable to players.
Right. You minimize turns, more lateral movements, and you allow the head turns to be the thing, so that people aren't having rotation unexpectedly. That feels like that's something
Yes.
a lot of the first generation of VR games really learn, and I'm sure you guys did with the first game you made.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've had several like hilarious moments where just like I remember one where we started rotating upside down, and just like everyone was like rotating in the game. It's just like there's some hilarious good moments there.
And you talked about the map a little bit, and I really want to dive into that. Can you talk about the genesis of that, how that has changed, the idea to put a giant tower in the center that people can take advantage of? How has that changed based on the hardware and also just based on the playtesting?
Yeah, so one of the most important things we want to achieve in VR is that a lot of games make very sci-fi looking or abstract looking or things that is frankly, they're doing it for very technical reasons. It's like if you make things look stylized or very, blurry, like foggy or something, it's easier for the hardware to handle. But the trade-off is there. It's things seem abstract and it's just not as it's just not interesting. So when we created the map, what we wanted was to create a real looking world that you go in, you immediately understand what it is. Oh, that's a farmland, that's a city. And from there, build near future sci-fi elements that really highlight the fact that this is not just everyday world, but it's a near future world. And then what we did was we created a giant structure in the middle of the map, because one of the biggest, coolest thing in VR is that your sense of scale is really, it's intensified. So when you see that thing in VR, you literally have to move your head and look up. It's so tall. And so when you put that thing in there and you can see how all the scale works, the next thing is, like we had play tests in the beginning where literally people were like, the first thing they did was, look at that thing, let's go climb it. It immediately gives you this action, like, let's go try this thing. Anyway, so that was the genesis of it. It's the scale and also creating something that's realistic looking.
Yeah, and also the complexity and density of objects. And not only is it this square footage in the area, but you have buildings that you can go inside, and some of that obviously is catered for as the play area shrinks during the round. You want these. You're designing for combat encounters that aren't just very far apart, hundreds of meters apart, but also very near field. So can you talk about that balance and what type of combat you designed for and how the level design accommodates that?
Yeah, so with a vertical combat system, people get really creative about gaining high ground. They climb up to impossibly high places, or they climb into a tree and hide there and snipe and do all these crazy things. So we have different biomes that we've created in this map. And there are different regions that really mixes up the gameplay. We have a lot of tall structures within the map itself besides the giant tower, so that there's plenty of opportunities for people to go a little crazy and invent new ways to fight, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really unique too with Pop One is that some of the enjoyment of watching soccer is just like you never know what's going to happen in the last minutes of a match, and that's something that we find happens a lot of time in Population One, is that using a combination of balance, verticality, positioning, squad composition, what kind of weapons and ammo you have at your disposal, it's not easy to tell what's going to happen, and that makes it really fun to watch and even participate. Even after we've been eliminated as a team, oftentimes we'll stick around and watch some teams that are really well matched up just to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, and the game also is cross-platform, right? People are going to be playing on PC VR and also with the Quest and the Quest 2 and mobile VR, and you want to have a balance in terms of their experiences, in terms of the draw distances and the level of fidelity. Can you talk about what the game looks like for each system and how they may be similar or different, and what you guys had to do to make that game work
Yeah.
across those different places setups?
Yeah. So Yeah, for population one, it's like obviously you want to be on as many headsets as possible, and a key component of that is having delivering a great experience to players no matter what headset they're playing on. And so, particularly for the Quest, we did a large rewrite and a refactor of the whole game. It took us about a year to do it, but we basically built a new game engine from the ground up inside of Unity that allowed us to make this even possible. And a lot of the tech for this actually didn't exist maybe a year and a half ago. So a lot of the tech that made this possible actually recently came about. So it's just we're using basically there's a supercomputing technique that we can use called data-oriented tech stack that Unity has that allows us to basically optimize all the way down to how the processor reads the bytes out of memory in order to make this extremely fast. So we're still rendering a 1 kilometer world that you can go anywhere and no rails, no limitations on the Quest. And so we have our own physics engine, our own custom modified networking layer, LOD system, particle system, like all these custom systems that allow us to run extremely well on a Quest, which also translates super well to the PC. So regardless of what headset you're on, you're still getting that same experience. So it's a really difficult challenge for us, but overall, like we're really pleased with how it turned out. Scales great to the Quest 2, runs great on the Quest. PC VR heads such as the Index looks fantastic, and as well as the Vive and Windows MR. So yeah, it's overall we're really happy with how it turned out, and most players, like depending on how you play, can still have a great time.
And you talk about, you know, the systems you had to build, and I imagine every type of system you're adding to the game design, to the engine, whether it's physics or I don't know if you experimented with vehicles at one point, but adds and compounds the complexity of what has to be kind of communicated between all the players. And
Yeah.
is that what determined, you know, the number of players you guys ended up choosing and how that balance works?
Yeah, so I think for us, like we actually spent a lot of time playtesting different player counts, and we started with 24, but we brought it down to 18 just because it actually felt better in terms of the pacing. So a
Hmm.
lot of battle royales have some interesting mechanics where there's usually you either have one or two zones depending on how lucky you are. It's like there's the hot zone where you jump in and boom, you're dead. But there's also the other zones that you can land in, which is more of a slow looting and a slow build up to a finish when the zone gets down to the final end. And around 24 players is a little too chaotic. And so having the 18 player count actually brought it back a little bit. So there's a little bit more of like a gathering strategic period that you can use to position yourself in the squad, maybe strategically pick off a squad or two that are off on their own that aren't in a good spot. So in terms of pacing, that felt pretty well.
So it's less like a network limitation and more about because you
Yeah,
guys started with this 1 kilometer area, you guys have a player speed and player movement. You know how fast people are going to be kind of traversing that
yeah,
space. You want to find the right number of players for the right, I guess, length of game time as well for people
yeah,
spending time in VR, which is going to be different than people, you know, spending hours and hours
yeah,
on a flat screen game.
yeah, for sure.
And you guys have building as well, you know, construction. What was the decision about creating and making that a part of the game mechanic, and how have players exploited that?
Yeah, the building part is actually a super interesting part for gameplay because, when you run across in VR and some areas are more exposed than others, and because our game is really tall, like someone could be really high up, like grabbing on and shooting at you, and you're kind of like looking around, and so there are wide open areas where you have to traverse. So one use case is you're traversing a wide open area, you have your squad mates next to you, and you're under fire, and you can quickly build cover to like let your teammates traverse. And that's like something that we've seen a lot. But the other thing is because you can climb anywhere, some people actually build up a little bit, they climb up their own builds and they glide off. Because when you fly in our game, it's a little faster than you walk. So people want to get high ground and fly a little bit. So that's another use case. And yet another one is that some people like to actually climb really, really, really high up and then build a sky bridge across and just like create these little stations above to snipe at people. So all these interesting situations are possible. But I think most of the situations that we see are people using the mechanic to help their teammates traverse wide open areas safely.
Yeah.
Right, and it's something that as I was playing it, felt like there was a lot of potential there. I was barely scratching the surface of what I could be doing with building, and like you said, I could imagine people doing crazy things, and the system feels like it supports it too, where you're building your own vast tower or something before someone shoots it down. It's pretty interesting. The spectator mode. So when you die, you are a ghost and you can be revived, but then if your squad is killed, you can spectate, like almost like in a god mode, and it made me think about some of the other popular multiplayer games have a lot of their success from people spectating or streaming it. And what have you guys done to make sure that's something that's going to be possible, that other people can, who aren't in the games, can watch, or people who are in the games can best broadcast out?
Yeah, so we've added some tools that won't be available right away at launch, but it will shortly after, which allow players to stream their first-person perspective and eventually other perspectives as well. So we have the biggest challenge associated with streaming VR, as you probably are very aware of, is just the graininess of a first-person perspective, as well as even our brains don't perceive it, but we have that subtle head shake that also goes
Yeah.
on as well. So what we've done is added motion smoothing to that, so that way you get a nice smooth pan, remove the rotation of your head turning left and right, as well as having the ability to render at high res up to like 4K at 60 hertz. So that's stuff that's coming in the future at post-launch, but that's something that we've done a lot with. And we also have some tools that we've also used for like esports. So when we've done our own internal tests and stuff like that, we have a little flying spectator cam that you can drive around on a screen. And so a lot of our trailers actually shot using that tool, so you can kind of get a glimpse of like the output that you would see is actually on the trailer itself too.
And then I imagine that's mostly on the PC side, and on the mobile side you can cast, and there are tools built in. I noticed on the Quest 2 performance was great, and I was able to record and cast no problem.
Great.
What other differences are you guys putting in to better utilize the extra processing power of the Quest 2?
Yeah, so there's a couple stuff that's in the works already, but obviously the stuff we have planned is obviously higher resolution textures, because the XR2 chipset is just an absolute monster of a chipset for VR. And so the ability to increase the texture resolution, also do some better filtering on the textures, so that way you have a nice crisp picture for plain old things like roads and dirt and things like that will look better. And then also better MSIA or anti-aliasing as well for the headset. So some of those improvements are coming soon, but they look really, really good, especially on the higher resolution panel that the Quest 2 uses. It looks really, really, really good.
Cool. And then as Oculus plans to unlock features that you run at higher frame rates and render high resolution, is that something you'll be exploring as well?
Yeah, that's definitely the dream. So that's to see what we obviously want to push the platform as hard as we can, because we want to have population one look the best. And yeah, if we can get a higher refresh rate at 90 hertz, like that'd be amazing. So it's like I've been eyeballing that one too. I'm like, ooh, that looks really good.
As you guys launch and the player base grows, you're looking down the line and seeing you're doing seasons of type events and stuff. And how do you imagine? What are your ideal situations for how the game evolves? Is it changing up the current map? Is it what's going to get people coming back?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, we launched on October 22nd, and then our launch price is $29.99. And with that, you get the whole base game. So it's a complete experience. You can unlock character skins and weapon skins. But along with that, one of our biggest goals here is to run a live service product. So we'll be having continual free events that once you have the product, you can participate in, and we'll be giving out free skins and that you can unlock, basically. So we want people to keep coming back. We want to grow that community. Along with that, we will also sell customized player skins, and depending on sometimes the seasons or events that are happening and all that stuff, and eventually battle passes. And Gabe and I have run live service businesses before, and it's really great for the players because there's just always something fun to do, and they just keep coming back and play with their friends.
So in terms of the gameplay, I had a chance to play about 6 matches of Population 1 alongside some of the developers and other playtesters, full games of 18 players and 6 squads. And I was paired with the developer, and so they were more experienced, and I have no idea if they were taking it easy on me, but I had a lot of fun. It captured all the things I like about Royale games in terms of having really memorable firefights and traversing maps, collecting the loot, finding shields, expanding my inventory, and everything felt very intuitive and fluid in the game. The way you access your inventory, the way you hunt and identify the weapons and the rare weapons, whether it's from pistol to SMG. The shooting mechanics I feel like are a nice balance between the more realistic shooters like you get in a Pavlov or an Onward and a more arcade-like shooter. It didn't feel too arcade-like, and you do have to do things like smash a magazine in and pull back to reload your weapons, but you weren't too encumbered by the mechanics of the weapons. It was more about exploring the map, climbing the buildings and finding a good tactical point for your team as the world is, of course, as the boundaries are shrinking, as it would be with any other kind of Royale game. And the firefights that I did get into were enjoyable, both from kind of a mid-range, where we were in different parts of the map between buildings, hiding behind and using sniper rifles or assault rifles, as well as the kind of close combat stuff. And that's the close combat firefights are where I saw a lot of the players using the building mechanics to create barriers and take advantage of the construction mechanic of the game. I didn't see a lot of the players, and I didn't myself use the building mechanics to build, bridges or these tall buildings and tall structures to fly around. And I'm not sure if that's something that it's going to make its way into the strategy of the game when it launches, but it's something that definitely helped when I was stuck in a corner and needed to just get some protection, get some defense while I was reviving a teammate. And so there is revive as well. You use paddles to revive teammates who are ghosts, and they wander the map until your whole squad dies. And then if your squad is knocked out, you have this God mode view, which is really cool because then you see all the other players and kind of can spectate. And the spectating mode, that's where I would love to see there be an opportunity to broadcast that and people take advantage of that mode to make this game viewable on streaming services like Twitch, to really build a community around these competitive matches. It's definitely a game where after a round was finished, which took about 15-20 minutes or so, I wanted to get back in immediately. I was definitely hungry for more of the game, which is a good sign, and it's something that I hope that other players will be as well when it does launch later this month. I definitely will be playing on the Quest 2. I found that the tetheredless aspect of it, even though I wasn't using room scale and walking around, but being able to do 360 and turn all the way around, that worked really well. And the game looked good on the Quest 2, ran just fine, no performance hiccups. I'll be interested to see if they can bump the frame rate up to 90 hertz and get better textures as the game gets updated after Quest 2's launch. But Population 1 will be available on the Oculus Store, on Quest, as well as on desktop VR come October 22nd. So hope to see y'all there. And one more thing before I let you guys go. As I mentioned in my Quest 2 review, there's going to be a bunch of accessories that are launching next week alongside the headset. One of the ones I'm most curious about and I'm still waiting for is the Fit Kit facial interface. So the Quest 2 comes with this facial interface. It's how you connect, how your face contacts with the headset. And I found that this wasn't quite wide enough for my face, and so the Fit Kit's going to offer a wider one and a narrower one. But in the meantime, VR Cover, which has made great Quest accessories and VR headset accessories, they've also partnered with Oculus and sent me their Quest 2 VR cover. And, form factor wise, it's actually almost exactly the same as the one that comes with the Quest 2 dimensionally, but there are also some differences, more importantly, in the way it touches your face. Primarily, there's a new foam pad here, and it has their fake leather design. It's actually quite a bit thicker than the foam pad that comes permanently attached to this facial interface. And there are two of these that come with the VR cover ones. But even though it's thicker, it's actually much cushier. And I found it much more comfortable than the one that comes with the Quest 2. There's also, a lot of people will want this, a nose guard. So it blocks that light leakage from your nose. And this is removable if you don't want that. I left it on. And prevent fogging, what they say they have is these passive vents, essentially a couple cutaway channels here to allow for some of that airflow to leave your face so the lenses don't fog up as much. And in my use, it didn't make that much of a difference. I was still pulling the Quest out and wiping the lenses down from time to time. But I did all of my play with Star Wars Squadrons using this VR cover for the Quest 2, and I really like it. It actually fits my face a lot better than the one that comes out of the box. It doesn't work with the glasses spacer, so if you need the extra space, if you do wear glasses or plan to wear glasses inside the headset, then this won't be for you. And I will have to see whether this is a better fit overall than the wider facial interface. That will be another optional accessory that's shipping for me next week. And then also it comes with this lens cover, which I find kind of neat because it just blocks and protects the lenses in when I'm not using the headset. So this is $30, and yeah, it's kind of, you know, it's an investment, but a tenth the cost of the Quest 2 even. But if you plan on using your headset a lot, or if you want to kind of swap between players and friends in your household, then investing in a second facial interface isn't a bad idea. So that's the VR cover, facial interface for the Quest 2. And next week is the launch of the headset. Let me know what you're looking forward to playing and whether you have one reserved in the comments below. And we'll be back next week with more coverage of more games and content for VR. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.